mentioned, my name is Omer Gavish. I'm the Pharma Life Science Leader in PwC Israel for the last 6 years. In PwC Israel, we work in the life science practice with companies in all subsectors in this area, health tech companies, biotech companies, pharmaceutical companies, etc. And as part of that, we are also collaborating with IATI for the 7th year in writing this really comprehensive report covering, I think, all the important things that happened in the industry in 2024. I will take the next probably 10, 15 minutes I think that I have to try and go over the highlights of the report. I won't cover anything. I will try to touch base on all the chapters that we have. The report itself covers the activity of the life science industry in 2024 in Israel. It touches the funding, transactions, grants, exports, a lot of data within that we can see. But I think that what I want to start with and what I want to begin is what Karen mentioned and what we've seen yesterday. What is in my mind the most important part of this report that we have this year for the first time. And this is Israel's rehabilitation system and the challenges and adaptations related to the Iron Sword Board. What we've seen or what we've done, we at IATI and PwC Israel interviewed senior executives in hospitals, rehabilitation centers, in the Israeli forces, and everyone that we could think of that was relevant in the industry to try and understand what were the challenges in the last year, or actually beginning October 7th. And I think what we've seen is that there were changes in treatment protocols in the battlefield that, together with the improvement in personal protection, brought to a stage that the increased survival rate was significantly higher than what we have seen and the healthcare system has seen in prior wars. That led to the fact that the shortage in facilities and staff that the system already had before the war became much more crucial and had much more challenges than the healthcare system expected to have. The result of that was increased investments, not only in staff, not only in facilities, but in technologies as well. A lot of innovative technologies allowing the current facilities, the beds that the facilities had, and the current staff to treat more people, to get better treatment to those who need rehabilitation, mental health rehabilitation as well. And the report goes deeper into that, describing the challenges and the journey that the healthcare system had during that year. Now going to the numbers. So if we think about, or if we look at what is the industry is like in a manner of employees and companies, we see that in the last few years there is no significant change. So 1,800 companies is what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, I think. What we have seen this year is a significant increase of 37% in the new established companies in the life science industry. That means 70 new companies were established. This is an increase compared to almost a half that we've seen in last year. Those employees, the 80,000 are only those that are directly employed by those 1,800 companies. We believe that there are also at least the same amount of employees being employed by the broader circle, meaning companies supporting those life science companies, such as industrial, chemical, and others. Those companies are still concentrated, like we've seen in prior years, in the center of Israel. So most of them are located in Tel Aviv, Rehovot, Nes Ziona, some of them Ra'anana, Herzliya. This didn't change significantly. It even increased this year. And not only that, companies established in these areas has increased, but more companies that has ceased and stopped their activity were in the more peripheral areas. However, we do believe and do see that the border circle is located in the more industrial areas, meaning Haifa, Beersheba, North, some of them are Jerusalem, and we think that the industry does support the peripheral areas as well. In the next few slides, I will try to go through the highlights of funding and investing. So overall, 2024 wasn't a great year. I think it was better than we expected, but it wasn't a great year. But although we all thought when we came into 2024 that it's going to be pretty similar to 2023, and we knew what the challenges are with the war and with everything that is going on, we have seen an increase. So I think 2023 suffered not only from the first shock of October 7th and the beginning of the war, but in the beginning of 2023, as a reminder, we had also the legal reform starting and a lot of uncertainty that was in addition to that. 2024 somehow overcome that. We have seen an increase of 25% in total investments made in companies in the industry. I will go through the breakdown in just a little bit, and reaching to 2.7 billion compared to 2.1 in prior year. This slide shows only the funding made by private equity. So we can see that 2.1 billion out of this 2.7 came from private equity funding. And we can see that there is an increase, even though it's not as significant as we see in the total funding, meaning, as we will see in a minute, that most of the increase came from other sources. I think it is interesting to see that overall, we can see that not only the funding and the total funding in dollar values is changing throughout the years. Obviously, the number of deals is kind of going the same way, meaning that in the last 5 years, if we think about the average deal size, we don't see a significant change, even in the more, I would say, the less successful years, such as 2023, it goes around the 10 million. However, if we look at a very specific subsector, which is the digital health or the health tech, we see that in the last 4 or 5 years, it has been significantly increased from 4 million to 10 million. And I think this is a good sign. We see the maturity of those companies going from the very, very initial stage, and some investors not really understanding the value of those companies. And they're kind of getting into and closing the gap to the rest of the subsectors and the way that investors look at them. This is a breakdown of the same 2.1 billion that I just showed, in a breakdown of which part of that came from foreign investors and which part came from local investors. So we can see that while the foreign investors are still the majority, the increase in their investments was significantly lower than in the one that we had for Israeli investors, and Israeli investors took a much larger part in that pie of these investments. We believe that it's still a good sign. I think that many of us, even here last year, were under the impression that foreigners will not be able or will not be willing to invest in Israel. So overall, we do see a slight increase. I think that if we're trying to analyze why there are more investments made by Israelis, probably they felt more comfortable with knowing what is actually going on. And I think it's still a good sign that we've seen investors, foreign investors, not running away, but willing to invest. They were not maybe willing to increase the risk that they had, but compared to what we had last year and the years before, it's better than we expected. Funding in the US. So as we all know probably, this is a significant portion of funding for the more mature Israeli companies. So it's been like that for many, many years, and I think this is a very significant source of investments coming especially from foreigners, and this year is again continuing the trend that we've already seen in 2023 after a very, very slow year in 2022. And I think what is more importantly is that we've not only seen an increase, a significant increase we can say, but we can also see that there are 4 IPOs in 2024 compared to none in 2023. So not only existing companies were able to reach out to this source of money, but also new companies were able to register in the US, both NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, and to get access to that source. If we are looking at 2025, from what we hear, from what we see, from talking to companies, talking to investors, I think we can see or anticipate that this number will only increase, both in the number of deals and in the number of IPOs. There are IPOs going on, and I think that the pipeline of Israeli companies looking to go public in the US, and currently public companies in Israel looking to dual listing is increasing. This slide shows not only the IPOs, but the acquisitions overall. So I think we saw that there was an increase in IPOs and follow-on offerings. There was also an increase in the activity of acquisitions of Israeli companies. The life science industry has always been one of the leading sectors within the high-tech industry overall. This year, it's been the third one compared to others, with 1.4 billion in IPOs and acquisitions. It's pretty much the same as we see as 2022, a slight decrease, but not that bad. And we can see that there is a huge improvement compared to what we've seen in 2023 that, again, was, I can say, probably almost a halt in transactions. These are the top 4 that we have identified, but I think this slide is not telling the whole story. If we would take in this slide, not at the end of the year, but at the end of the third quarter, 3 out of those 4 transactions would have been within the top 10 transactions in the high-tech industry. So I think we've seen a very strong beginning of the year compared to other sectors of the high-tech industry. We've seen for the 4th or 5th consecutive year a transaction or acquisition of over $500 million. It's still not the mega deals that we've seen in the past of over $1 billion, but it's a nice number, I think, and we keep that for the 5th year, as I said. At the end of the year, so the 4th quarter was a little bit stronger for other sectors, so only at the end of the day, on the end of the year, only V-Wave was considered one of the top 10. But we can see that the amounts here are pretty significant. Some of the potential earnouts are significant as well. It can bring that to much more significant numbers. 2025 started pretty well. I think we had 2 days ago an announcement of a Boston Scientific transaction that potentially can be above $500 million as well. And looking at the pipelines, talking to VCs, talking to companies, I think we can anticipate that 2025 will continue the improvement that we've seen in 2024 in the number of acquisitions and in the amounts. The third source for funding for companies after we covered the private equity and the public equity is grants, is government grants being granted by the Israel Innovation Authority. So over 500 million shekels were invested only in life science companies in 2024 through these 4 main sectors or divisions, I would say. We can see that the 2 most significant ones were the startup division and the growth division. This is in line with 2 things. First, I think the Israel Innovation Authority purpose of supporting companies in early stages, providing them with the funding they need. And it is also in line in what you can see in the report, the stage and maturity of the industry. So most of the companies in this industry are still in the very early stages, maybe not seed, but preliminary R&D. So this is we see that the two divisions that were more active are related to the same growth or maturity rate of the companies. It's also important to say that during the war and to support companies in need, the Israeli Authority also had the fast track program that allowed companies in need for quick access in addition to what we've seen here. And I think overall, as we said, we were talking about Israeli investors trying to make efforts and support those companies. So I think that was part of it as well. Lastly, as Karen mentioned, during the last few weeks, IATI has conducted a survey among the top VCs and investors in Israel to try, with a few questions, understand how what are their reflections on 2024 and what they think 2025 is going to look like. So we want to focus only on this one, and again, in the report, you will be able to see many others of what they think about 2025 and specifically on foreign investments. And I think it's very encouraging to see that 85% of those that replied believes that in 2025, investment or capital raise from foreigners will exceed 2024. So this is encouraging not only for the life science industry, but I think for the country and overall. And hopefully, this is what we will be able to see and stand here next year talking about much, much better data, funding, and industry overall. So as Karen mentioned, on Sunday or early next week, the full report with all the data, everything I just showed and much more will be available on IATI's website. I do encourage everyone to get in and see and read, especially the part that I started with, which was just, the tip of the edge of the rehabilitation chapter, which describes in details what Israel and the healthcare system went through in the last year. Thank you very much.